Where was I? Tonight, would you please help me welcome our speaker, Kevin?
My name's Kevin. I'm an alcoholic. I was thinking a couple of weeks ago when Kirk asked me to share, I said, yeah, sure. I'm always honored to share my experience, strength of hope, and hope with the program, about the program, and with the program, Alcoholics Anonymous. And then today came. And then that fear starts creeping in. And Kirk sent me a text about 3 o'clock. He says, are you ready to go? Yeah, I'm ready to go. I bring my big book, which I got 19 years and 4 months ago. It is my friend. My sobriety date is June 28th, 2001. Thank you. Thank you. There's always a couple standard things I start my story with. I'm going to change it up a little bit today. I usually start my story with the first time I took a drink. But I'm going to go back a little bit and into my early childhood. And my first memory of my early childhood, I was 3 years old. My dad was a machinist, tool and die maker in Detroit. And my earliest memory was him beating up my mom, drunk, with me and my little sister underneath the table. And I had a little toy ray gun, and I was trying to shoot him. My mom left him shortly after that. And that critical male figure that I should have had was never there. He was always in the bar. I think I saw him twice in my childhood. And then in 1979, I was hanging out with these guys in Phoenix, and they were from Toledo, Ohio, and I went back there to live in Toledo for the summer, and my whole goal that summer was to ride my motorcycle from Toledo to Detroit to say hello to my dad and punch him in the nose. It didn't happen that way. He died of the disease of alcoholism when he was 46 years old, 1988, and I did go to his funeral. My mom's second bad choice was my stepdad, who was also an alcoholic, and he was a Korean War vet, and he was the real deal. He had a scar from his foot to his hip from a Chinese soldier trying to take him out. He had PTSD before that was a diagnosis. They used to call it shell shock. And he was one angry man, and he beat the hell out of me for about 7 years. Fast forward to 1969, my mom and stepdad, they were postal workers, so they decided to move to Arizona from Chicago. And they moved to Scottsdale, and they were looking for jobs. And then about 4 months later, my mom realized that my stepdad had spent all the family money. She was broke. So she ran him off. That's the last time I saw him alive. He died in 1977 of alcoholism in his brother's bar in Chicago. Yeah, and I didn't shed a tear over that one either. So instead of living in Scottsdale, we moved to Sedona in 1970, which was kind of cool because when I got there, I was a baseball player. When I got there, June of 1970, one of the kids I met said, we're having a party on Friday night. Why don't you come to it with me? And I said, yeah, sure. And it was in a place called The Meadow, which is in Oak Creek Canyon between Rainbow Trailer Park and Indian Gardens, if you guys know where that is. And how do you get to The Meadow? By the back road. So here I am with all these new friends. There's a bonfire going. People are drinking Boone's Farm. There's some weed going around, and I am like nervous. I don't want to talk to anybody. I am like really nervous of just being there with all these new people. And then I started drinking at Boone's Farm. The more I drank, the less nervous I became. And by the end of the night, I was part of the party. And my next memory was the next morning. I was laying in the dirt, covered with my vomit. The fire was smoldering, and all the other kids were gone. I knew in June of 1970 I was different. I drank differently. I just tried to prove that I could drink like a gentleman, just like the book says, for 30 years. So, right after that, my mom got real tired of me just hanging out, drinking and doing other things and not going to school. And Sergeant Paul Brockman of the Coconino County Sheriff's Department shows up to my mom's house one day and said, "Grab your coat, we're going for a ride." I'm 15, almost 16 years old. And we drove, and it was December. I remember it being cold. We drove past Flagstaff, we're headed north, and he pulls into this ranch, and he said, "This is your home." So my mom put me up for, I don't know, adoption. And I got picked up by this old rancher and all these cowboys on his working ranch north of Flagstaff. And next thing I know, I'm living in the bunkhouse with all these cowboys. Culture shock, to say the least. But the one thing, and that was my first male role model that I had, was that old man rancher and those cowboys. And they made me tough. We worked from sun up to sundown. I learned how to ride a horse. I learned how to cut wood. I learned how to fix fence. All these things, all these life skills that I thought I'd never use again. And and I was counting the days. Yeah, I've been here for 240 days. However, I'm still sneaking out to feed my disease because it's still here, and I got to feed it. I got to get right. And one day the old rancher comes up to me and says, "Hey, hop in the truck. We're going to go for a ride." I went, "Oh no, here we go again." So we drive into Flagstaff, and we go to the old Arizona Paint Building, and he says, "I want you to go talk to the recruiter." And I went, "Well, cool." Then I had visions of being in the Navy, wearing the Dixie Cup, doing all the aircraft carrier stuff. And man, I was really excited. So we're walking down this long hallway, and maybe going to the Air Force, and we walk past the Air Force. I guess it's not the Air Force. Army, okay, no Army. Navy, here it comes. Boom, right past the Navy. Right into the Marine Corps recruiter's office. Next thing, 2 weeks later, I'm in boot camp. San Diego, United States Marine Corps. And again, scared out of my mind. I'm 17 years old. And again, my disease went with me. But now I could drink legally. As soon as I got done with boot camp, even though I'm 17, I can drink legally on base. And I drank a lot for 4 years. Went to Japan, saw Japan, drank a lot. Went to the West Coast, saw the West Coast, drank a lot. Finished up in the East Coast, drinking a lot. I got an honorable discharge. However, I didn't have a lot of success getting and holding on to rank. I started out in E1. 4 years later, I got out in E2. Again, my alcoholism had an impact on my career in the Marine Corps. Got out of the Marine Corps. There was no work in northern Arizona in the late 70s, so I moved down to Phoenix and found a bunch of knucklehead buddies. One of the coolest things I did in Marine Corps was bought a brand new Harley-Davidson motorcycle, because they had a kiosk in Iwakuni, Japan, with a bike there. So to try to limit my drinking while I was over there, I bought a new bike, and they had a new bike waiting for me when I got home. So that was kind of cool. When I got in the Marine Corps, moved to Phoenix and worked at a variety of construction jobs. Went to Phoenix College for several semesters on a GI Bill. And my mom who was a career postal employee. She was the director of personnel for the Northern Arizona Post Office in Flagstaff. And she said, Kevin, come take the civil service test. And I really didn't want to take a civil service test. And she said, we're giving a test in Sedona. Take the test. So, of course, I got hammered the night before to prepare for the test. Drove up there, and man, I got to the Elks Lodge in Sedona, and all these really smart-looking people were in the parking lot, ready to take this test. And I was in my old greasy Levi's and Holy T-shirt, and I took the test, and I got the highest score out of 110 people. We're pretty smart people sitting in this room if we really apply ourselves. And I guess I applied myself that day. Long story short, I got the job. Became a postman in December of 1983. Now I could afford to drink a lot. Plus I could get all those American dream things that we love. You know, I bought a house. I got a four-wheel drive truck. You know, I upgraded my motorcycle, all these wonderful things. I got married, had a wonderful child. November 25th, 1985, Cottonwood, Arizona, my son Christopher was born. He was born at, and I was drunk that weekend. It was Thanksgiving weekend, and I was kind of got myself in a jam, like our drinking does. And he had to be born by Monday morning because I had to go back to work because I told him he was going to be born. So my buddy gave me the solution. I had my wife drink a bottle of castor oil, and he was born 4 hours later. I handed my car keys to my buddy, and I was able to drink another day. I didn't have to go to work. It was great. But it really wasn't, because that was like one of the most important days of my life. How disrespectful was I during those times in my life? Totally disrespectful. The first marriage didn't work out. Second marriage didn't work out. Third marriage didn't work out. And then came along the 90s, which I call it the decade of bad decisions. I lost that post office job, a job that's impossible to get fired from. I got fired from that job in 93. And I went on a 8-year hiatus. You know, God bless the post office. They sent me to treatment in 1992 to try to help me save my life. I got 30 days coming up the hill. I never got 31. I didn't want anybody in Sedona to know that I was an alcoholic. So I did no follow-up work. Was drinking in a couple weeks. Bad decision, 90s. Looking for somebody to hang out with. I joined a motorcycle club. And I really put my heart and soul into that motorcycle club. And after a few years, I realized that I could build bikes just as good as these guys. I could ride motorcycles just as good as these guys, but I didn't have that edge that those guys had. And I got thrown out of that organization. And after being part of a tight brotherhood, and after losing all my friends in Sedona and the Verde Valley, late 90s, I'm alone. I ain't got nobody, including my family. My son's no longer in my life, and I am desperate. And I'm drinking every frickin' day. And now I got trouble with the police. Ended up getting in a minor altercation. Well, I don't know if it was minor. It was a gun battle. I shot a guy, and I went to the penitentiary. My number is 122-891. And because he was wounded, I pled it down. I did my time. I came back out, and I went back to my same old song and dance, drinking and using the powdered goods and the dry goods, and got busted again in 99. Cops kicked my door down. Got put on probation for the first time in my life. And the significance of that day when I was at probation orientation in 2000, there was this guy on the stage with a boombox with loud rock music who was going to conduct the class. And that guy, as I will tell you later, became a very significant man in my life. And I was sitting in the back row, of course, because I didn't want to be there. Finish up what you got to say, and I'm out the door. And he said something that started penetrating the thick skull. And I stayed after the group and talked to the guy. Told him my name, he told me his name, and started doing the probation thing. And the judge, old Judge Anderson at Camp Verde, said, "I never want to see you again." Yes, sir. Well, things happen. And I got violated a year later, and I'm sitting in a county jail again, and for 40 days, 40 nights, and that's the first time I actually looked up and said, "God," and it wasn't a prayer, it was a demand, "please help me or take me." And he must have been listening. That was June 27, 2001. That was the last day I ever used, to this very day here. So for 40 days, I prayed, 40 days, 40 nights. "God, please make Judge Anderson sick on my court day. Judge, please make Judge Anderson sick." He didn't hear that prayer. But the prayer he did hear was, "Give me another chance," because I had 9 years of prison hanging over my head. And he said, "I'm giving you one more chance. And if we catch you drinking or drugging, I'm throwing you away for 9 years." And that's what it took for me to get the message. For me to get the message. So then starts my journey. And I appreciate you guys being here, because I get to share these 19 years with you, the high points. And man, you know, in my kitchen of my house that I have a mortgage that's paid on time with my wife, and I'll be walking around my kitchen in the morning, and I'll pinch myself, and I'll say, "Man, this is me. I've got a roof over my head. You know, I've got my bills paid." But I have to take one step back, because I sold my house in Sedona, and I became homeless right towards the end there. And my alcoholic mind, which is a beautiful beast, as I'm living on the Verde River in my yellow Dodge Surfer van with a mermaid headliner and a shag carpet, and my beanbag chair I'm sleeping on, and my little fire, I said, "You know what? I'm not homeless. I'm an outdoorsman." Yeah. So, start my story. Just happened a halfway house, and back then we called them halfway houses. There wasn't sober livings. There weren't, what are the different words they use today? It was a halfway house, and a halfway house is halfway between jail and society, and that's what I was in, an old school, old-fashioned halfway house. So we went to a meeting. We went to a meeting every night, so I got to ride in the van, for, the 90, 120 days I was there. That was humbling. But we went to a group on Thursday night. It was a big book study. By the way, I've always had a big book study part of my meeting repertoire since then. And that's where I met a couple of the characters that I want to mention. The first one is Harry the hiker. And I first met Harry, and he was smiling, and he was talking, and Harry's 28 years sober, smiling. He wore a ball cap with an eagle feather in it, and he was always talking to the women, and he always had good stuff to say, and I looked at him, and 30 days later I said, "I want him to be my sponsor." So I figured I'd just go up and, it was a done deal, And he said, "Yeah, we're going to have a meeting." So he invited me out to his house. He had a ranch. He still lives out there. He has a ranch out in Cornville. And, before that day was over, I had done my first step without my knowledge. And he asked me every question in the book. And I guess I answered them all right, because he said, "Yeah, I'll take you on as a sponsee. And this is what we're going to do." So we started working the steps. And, if you're new in recovery, I'm not telling you what to do, but when you pick a sponsor with a moniker like hiker, You might want to think about it. Because that elderly gentleman took me hiking all over northern Arizona. I mean, everywhere. We hiked. Okay, let's hike and do a step. Okay, come out to the ranch, we'll work and do a step. Everything involved exercise. And, you know, and I'd be laying and, you know, I can't go anymore, Harry. I'm huffing and puffing. And he just told me that why don't I suggest that you might quit smoking cigarettes? You might be able to keep up with me. You're 44, I'm 70. What's the issue? Yeah. So, and then enter Mr. Ray DeSantos. Ray is no longer with us. He went to the big AA meeting in the sky. He was part of that home group at the Tuesday night speaker meeting. And when I first met him, and they called him the Spaniard. He had scoliosis of the spine. So he wasn't that tall to begin with, but he was also hunched over, and he looked up at you, and he has this deep, gravelly voice. And so he said, "Hey, kid, what are you doing after the meeting?" And I said, "Well, Ray, I got to go in the van because we're going back to the house, and, you know, that's mandatory." And he goes, "Oh, no, I took care of that thing." And he took care of that thing. AA has got a frickin' mafia, and here he is, the Goomba of Cottonwood. But man, he took care of that thing. So I went to the business meeting. I never went to a business meeting. I'm sitting next to Ray. Next thing I know, Ray is volunteering me for the greeter, coffee maker, the guy who holds the key, opens the door position. All his cronies follow, raise their hands, and I'm in. The vote was unanimous. And I was stuck. I was stuck with AA. I had the key. And if I don't open up the key open up the meeting every Tuesday, Ray is going to send the AA mafia after me, and I'm done. So I kept that. I kept my first service commitment for a year. That commitment saved my frickin' life that first year. That first year that I wanted to go back out there because I didn't want to stay in here. There's no fun in here. The fun's out there. Broken thinker. Yeah, God bless Ray. And Ray gave me a history book on AA that my wife and I have and my wife's in recovery. I'll share a little bit about that in a minute. We have a whole bookshelf in our home dedicated to AA literature and recovery literature. And Ray gave me like this antique book that I cherish to this very day. Enter Tom. Tom was a guy who had 19 years, and he heard me share, I don't know. And you guys got to remember, I had some real fashion issues when I was new. I would show up to the meetings with sweats and a Holy t-shirt with a big gulp. And the homegroup members would just look at me. What are you guys looking at? So, and Tom called me after the meeting, and he goes, "You know, you're a really angry guy." And I said, "Yeah, I'm an intense person." And I started spewing off all this stuff that I had created in my life that I was going through. And I said, "Yeah, man, I'm an angry guy because this and this and this." He goes, "I want you to read a passage out of the big book, and I'll see you next week." I said, "Okay." So he said it was the last paragraph on page 103. I still, to this very day, this is the third edition, I have it highlighted. "After all, our problems were of our own making. Bottles were only a symbol. Besides, we have stopped fighting anybody or anything. We have to." And I said, as advised by Tom, 2001. I've retired this book. And the story behind this book is when I came in, the fourth edition had just come out. So all the home group members, you know, with time had their shiny new fourth editions. But I wanted everybody to think like I had time. So there was a stack of third editions over there. So I grabbed one of them. And I've had this book ever since. I love this book. It has saved my life. So I saw Tom the next Tuesday. Tom got me after the meeting. He goes, did you read the passage? I said, yeah, it didn't do anything. And he goes, no, you knucklehead. I want you to read that passage every day. If you got to read it 10 times a day, read it 10 times a day. I want you to read it every day for at least a year or however long it takes you to start getting some humility in your life and in this program. And I did. I paid attention. I did. For over a year, I read that passage. I still read that passage. That is the last time I ever saw Tom. He is one of my recovery angels. I don't know, moved away or whatever. Never saw him again. And they call these guys the Four Horsemen. Fourth guy, Tom M. Tom M. and I are still dear friends. Tom M. used to be my grant sponsor. I will always call Tom M. my grant sponsor. He lives over in Clarkdale. He just celebrated 41 years. His sister was a member of that same home group, and she said, you know, Kevin, I think you need some help. And I said, yeah. She said, do you know my brother? And I said, no. She said, well, he lives down this road in Clarkdale. I'll give you his address. And I said, you don't have to give me his address. I know exactly where he lives, because I used to shenanigan a couple of houses down from him. So Sunday morning, I went to his house, and she also said, I'll tell him you're coming over. Cool. And I freaking had it with AA, and I've had it with life, and the 9 years in prison really didn't see that long anymore, but I wanted to get out there and live that old life. You know, hey, I'll screw up and I'll do the time. So I go knocking on Tom's door, and he opens the door. He's got this surprised look on his face. He goes, yeah, can I help you? And I said, yeah, I'm Kevin, and I'm here to talk to you. And he goes, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, well, your sister sent me by, and she said you would help me and, save my life and all that. And he kind of just shook his head. And so he said, come on in. So I went in his house, and I looked to the right, and it was the first time I actually really connected with someone in a program. There was his motorcycle sitting there. It was orange Harley. And I went, oh, you ride? He goes, yeah. So Tom took me to his kitchen table and listened to me. He didn't have a lot to say. I had a lot to say. He listened to me for about 4 hours, and he said, and he gave me some advice. I'd like you to do this, this, and this, and give me a call. The most significant thing about that day is that I was able to work through the situation and save my recovery. Just work through the situation instead of I did the next right thing instead of doing the next wrong thing. And we're still friends. I was over at his house a couple of weeks ago. He's quite a human being. I love him so much. And then life goes on, and Kirk asked me if I was going to share the Grand Canyon story. So I will. Harry the hiker, getting ready to do my fourth and fifth. My fourth step was 8 pages long, single-spaced. I had done a lot of knucklehead behavior over the years. So he said, are you ready to share your fourth? I said, yes, I am. He said, well, we're going to take a drive, be at my house at, I think, 5:30, that'd be a.m., and we're going to drive, and we're going to go on a hike. I said, yeah, okay, I'm surprised. So we drove and drove and drove and drove. We drove to the Grand Canyon, and on the way from Cornville to Grand Canyon, I am sharing my fourth step with him. Getting rid of everything. And he is sharing some of the stuff with me like, wow, this guy's not a god. He's human just like me. And it was a very productive morning as I completed my fourth step with him. He said, okay, now we're going to hike down to a place called Indian Gardens. And I said, cool, and the trail's very busy. 2002, all the trails in Arizona were closed except Grand Canyon. But see, I didn't know that. And we started hiking. It was wonderful. People on the trail, laughing, smiling. condors, bighorn sheep, people riding donkeys by us. And I really hadn't worked out for the hike. I had quit smoking like 2 months before. I figured, yeah, I'm good. I'm Gucci. And I was all the way down. Man, it was wonderful, skipping and, this is good. We had a little bit, I brought a sandwich. We had sandwiches on the bottom at Indian Gardens. Turned around and came back. And that's where things got a little dicey. About the third of the way up, I couldn't walk anymore. My legs were like rubber. I fell on the trail. I was laying on the trail. And because so many people were walking on that trail, it was like 3 inches of powdered dust. So I'm laying in the trail, and Harry's sitting on a rock telling me that I don't have enough money for a helicopter and that I better get up and we need to walk out of here. And people are genuinely concerned, coming up to me and saying, "Hey, mister, are you okay?" "No, I'm not." And Harry would just keep it moving. "He's fine, he's fine." So I got up, and now I'm covered in dust, and you can see like the lines where my sweat is. And people are like now looking at me as we're passing, going up the trail. So I made it, and I see the plateau. I can do this. I can do this plateau. I can make this. And we get to the top of that plateau. I look up. There's another freaking plateau. Another plateau. He says, "You got to keep going, man." Got up to that next plateau. There's another plateau. This is getting old. Finally, the trail starts to widen, and he said, "We're getting towards the top. Keep going. You're going to be okay." And I see the top of the trail, and I see all the people in the cars, and I see this Japanese family up there. And you guys remember I was stationed in Japan for a year, so I know a few Japanese words. And I have these bright ideas in my life, which really are not that bright. So I run up to this family, and I start spewing Japanese words at them. "Konnichiwa, doi tashimaste, hayako dozo." And they looked at me covered in dust and sweat, and they ran. And they ran. And Harry comes walking up to me and says, "Don't do that, dude. Don't scare the tourists." The significant thing about that day, it was the first time I actually accomplished anything in about 10 years. In about 10 years. I just celebrated 1 year. I had that coin with me, and man, I was feeling good. I had turned a corner in my recovery. So moving forward, the old guys in AA saved my life. The ladies, the elderly ladies, saved my life because they would call me out on stuff. And I just started going to meetings. Meetings. I completed the steps. And if you guys are struggling with sponsorship, I didn't have any success personally sponsoring anybody till I got 10 years sober. And all of a sudden something changed. But like Bill W. says, it's not about that person staying sober, it's about me staying sober. Because he had failure after failure when he started his road to recovery way back in the 30s. And my wife gave me some advice. She used to work in the recovery field, and I do now. I've been working in behavioral health for 15 years. I've been blessed with a second career in life. And she said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "Well, the VA is still trying to figure that out. They don't know." And so she said, "What you're trying to do, Kevin, is you're trying to sponsor newcomers, and you're working with new people in recovery 40-plus hours a week. It's not going to work for you." And it didn't. So, if you want me to sponsor you, I will. But you got to have a year. You got to have a year. Accomplishments in my recovery, besides just staying sober, I was able to and what's the cutoff time? What time? What times can I go to? I got 10 minutes, so okay. So I've accomplished a lot in recovery. You know, I got my civil rights restored. I did the impossible. I petitioned the court to get because I'm a hunter, I'm a fisher. I was raised in northern Arizona. I petitioned the court to get my gun rights back. And the judge said yes. Now, the DA was not happy that day. I can tell you that for a fact, because she had us file on me. So don't be afraid to become a productive member of society and get your rights back. Ask, because it'll happen. It'll happen. I met my wife at a meeting in Jerome 18 years ago. Long blonde hair, giant blue eyes, beautiful. Said hello, my name's Kevin, you know, I'm cool. She didn't give me the time of day, and she was wearing a watch. Al-Anon had already straightened her out. So fast forward 6 years, I'm at a motorcycle rally in Camp Verde, and there she is. And I hadn't seen her in several years because I lived over there, she lived over here. She had bought a bike. I was a hero because I got her gas cap off so she could put gas in her bike. And we went out on a date, and it was good. And we went on a second date, and it was good. I had 7 years, she had 8. I thought, well, this is it. This is going to work out. You know, we dated, we fell in love. I asked her to marry me. And then I moved in with her. And a week later, the shit hit the fan. Yeah, my dog shit on her carpet. It was complicated. I was working in construction in Montana. We struggled through a year. And one of my buddies, God bless him, Door Gunner Tom from the Humboldt Men's Stag, said, you know what, Kevin? You're mentally ill. And I thought, well, Tom, you're not a doctor. However, if you're a Vietnam vet with over 20 years, so I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to go to the VA, and I'm going to seek help through the behavioral health unit, which I did. And I spent a year outpatient getting therapy and was able to pick up my 10-year chip years ago and able to rebuild the relationship with my now wife. We got married May 10th, I got to get that right, 2014. And the guy who presided over it was the guy I told you about way back in 2000, that probation officer, and now he's like the main dude in Prescott, Mr. John Morris, married us. We have remained friends, me and John, and he put me in situations my first 10 years of speaking in front of new people on probation, etc., that really kept me focused on my recovery. I got to share a couple things in closing. July 2017. I'm shaving one morning, and I look in the mirror, and there's a lump on my neck. And I'm thinking, man, maybe I pulled a muscle. I don't know. But I had plans for the first time in 40 years, because I wasn't too drunk, high, broke, insane, whatever, to go to Sturgis on my motorcycle. 40 years I've been trying to get out of the frickin' driveway. One of my friends even lent me a U-Haul one year, and I couldn't get out of the driveway. And then the two guys that were going with me dropped out, so it was just me, the motorcycle, and my concealed weapon, and we headed to Sturgis. And I had a sober ranch to stay at. I made the trip. It was wonderful just getting out there. I didn't put it on a trailer. I didn't do all that. You know, old school. I camped. I rode like those guys taught me 40 years ago. I did it old school. Made it back. And my wife says, you know, I don't care if you go. Just make sure you call me every day, which I did. Got back. Went to the VA. They ran a test. Said, no, you got to go to Phoenix to a specialist. He said, yeah, you got to go get a biopsy. Long story short, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. I had a tumor in my neck. And so I'm sitting in the parking lot, and I'm thinking, you know, I could just take a left and I go back to Phoenix. I know how to get in trouble. You know, because this thing, AA, after 16 years, ain't working for me. I'm dying. The doctor didn't tell me I'm dying, but by the time I got to his office in the parking lot, I'm dying. My days on earth are limited. Who knows how long I have? Doctor never said that. My mind said that. So I looked up, asked God, like have occasionally over the years, okay, now what? And he said, build your cancer support team and go north. So I got in my car, started driving I-17 north. I called my dear friend who's a registered nurse, who's in recovery, just recuperating from breast cancer. She answered the phone and said, yes, I'll be on your team. Called my friend John Morris, who's a cancer survivor. He said, yes, Kevin, I'll be on your team. Called that sister of Tom Mingus, Tom M., who got me squared away. Called her. She goes, she's a 2-time cancer survivor. She said, yes, Kevin, I'll be on your cancer team. The fourth call was to my sponsor. And he goes, no, you're not going to die. You know, we got a lot of motorcycle riding to do. And I said, no, the doctor said. And he goes, yeah, never mind. Just call me when you get home. Fifth call was to my wife. When I called my wife, I was 2 blocks from home. I had worked through that tough situation without drinking. I'd worked through that tough situation. Long story short, I had surgery. Yeah, and one of my buddies in recovery went down there with me, and the doc had a purple magic marker. He goes, oh, point where it is. I'm thinking, well, this isn't very high tech. So he said, okay. So he draws a line like this. And my buddies, I looked at him. I said, is it very big? He goes, oh, no. He goes, oh, it's huge, dude, after the surgery. So, and we had a meeting in my hospital room. The nurses loved it. I went through chemo. I went through radiation. I lost a bunch of weight. Long story short, I've been cancer-free for 2.5 years. And this is more cancer they had to burn off of me. And, you know, all I can tell you guys, don't ride your motorcycle around the streets of Arizona without a shirt on, lathered up in Hawaiian tropic for 20 years. That's all I can say. And then I'd like to share to close about my special friend, whose name was Luther. My buddy Joe W. from the other program said, hey, my dog had puppies. I was 3.5 years sober. They're half Mastiff, half Rottweiler. Do you want one? Come over and check them out. So I went over there, 9 puppies, 6 females, 3 males. They were all brindle except one, who was jet black. And he's the one that came running up to me. I said, that's the one I want. And over the next 15 years, that big old black dog saved my sobriety more than once. Because for me, being an irresponsible human being for 30 years, being a responsible pet owner was paramount in my life. You know, instead of going, but the wife's out of town, I can go do this. The big dog's looking at me. You know, let's go for a walk. And my wife said, you know, you've never lost anything that you've really loved. I didn't love my dad. I didn't love my stepdad. And she was right. She was right. She said, but you love that dog. And when he goes, you're going to hurt. So October 14th, last year, 2019, he was following me in the bedroom, and he had a stroke. And he was done. I knew he was done. I called her. She works nights. I called her to work. I said, hey, you know, tomorrow's the day I'm going to call the vet. And we put him down on October 15th. And it was good. You know, he was good. He tried to bite the vet, so it was all good. He went out with a bang. They had to muzzle him to put him down. I said, usually he's not this way, but yeah. So, and there's the void. The void was created. What am I going to put in the void? Alcohol or whatever? No. I'm going to open up Craigslist, and I'm going to find me a new motorcycle. And I did. 2 days later, I found my bike. I sold my old bike, probably the last bike I'll ever build. It went to a young guy in Cottonwood, and I got a bike for the first time in 45 years with a frickin' radio on it. I got a radio. And you put the phone on it like all my buddies, and I got music, you know. Something I said I would never do, ride a motorcycle with music. I'm doing it. Yeah. So you know what, you guys? Like my grand sponsor, Tom M. says, do all 12 steps. Give this thing a chance. Don't leave. Don't leave before the steps start working in your life. Don't leave. Call somebody. Call somebody. I give my clients my card when they come in, and I said, the deal is, call me before you relapse, not after. I don't care if it's 2 in the morning, and we will work through that moment. Thank you for letting me share.
Let's give our friend Kevin another great hand. This has been a regular meeting of the Rarely Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I don't know if our secretary mentioned, but Kaylin at the front of the meeting, she's got a notebook. If you would like to be a home group member, to put your name, your sobriety date, and your phone number in this book, it's going to be sitting at the front table. Please do that. That way we can put a phone list together for anybody that's new so they can get a copy of that, and that phone list will be ready next week. Please stay and help clean up after the meeting. Our speaker has been escorted to the back of the room. You know, it's a very polite thing to do to thank the speaker on your way out for taking their time with us tonight. So take a moment to do that. Please stand, and the meeting is too large tonight to make a circle, so let's just stand and join us in the Lord's Prayer. Thank you.